Excellent. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for today's RocketChat sponsored government talk webinar. We'll give it a few minutes for folks to log in and get connected here. In the meantime, a few housekeeping. If as we go through this discussion, any questions or chat, if you see the right-hand corner of your screen, there's a channel for chats and questions. Please make this as interactive as possible. All right, we've got 1 minute. I know we still have folks joining. Again, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's Rocket Chat sponsored GovTalk webinar. Three things government IT will focus on this year. My name is Chris Brown, and I'm currently manage Rocket Chat's public sector business here in North America, and I'll be your moderator today. I'm joined today by Peter Brendenson. Peter is our head of sales for EMEA here at Rocket Chat. Peter has been building sales organizations at companies such as Alfresco and Zendesk, and has been operating and selling into the government organizations for more than 20 years. Also joining us is Mike Farman. Mike is VP of Customer Experience at Rocket Chat. Mike has over 30 years of experience in pre-sales, product management, customer success with startups, and some of the largest software vendors, including Documentum and Alfresco. And we're happy to welcome Nikki Papazalakis, the founder and CEO of Mobility for Public Safety. They're the creators of Bridge for Safe Public Safety, also known as Bridge for PS, which is the collaboration app. Nikki, she has worked in public safety technology and communications for over 20 years. She holds a bachelor's degree in international trade and finance, as well as a master's of public administration. So welcome, panelists. Thank you for being here today. Again, any questions, you'll see down in the lower right-hand column, we have a questions and chat channel. Please, ask your questions there and help, engage with our speakers. So what brought about this event? Back last year in 2021, RocketChat had spoke to thousands of IT and non-IT professionals in government. And, and these are some of the things that we found out. And what we found out was that government institutions are facing, a tough fight right now. The demand for digitalization versus the concern for data privacy and security. That gap is widening, and it needs to be closed. Three main themes emerged through our question and our interactions. And the biggest challenge is government that we, brought this down to what they're facing today is what's needed in government and what's needed in a government-ready software solution. The first topic that we'll be getting into today is, governments need flexible modular platforms. And what we mean by that is these are platforms that are resilient, scalable, and support fast speed to delivery, while also reducing cost to deliver. So with that, let's start off. Nikki, I'll throw the first question your way. Why is software flexibility and modularity important to your public sector customers?
Thank you, and I appreciate being invited to be on the panel. So Bridge for Public Safety obviously serves a public safety community in the United States, which public safety is a pretty broad industry and a broad term with a lot of different functions and operational environments, a lot of different types of users and organizations, and they very often have the need to be able to share information and interoperate and collaborate with one another. And so given the dynamic nature of the user base that I serve, the scalability, the flexibility are really important, and particularly being able to support such diverse stakeholders that have very different jobs, but then when they need to come together, they need to be able to use similar tools for their particular purpose as well as for a broader purpose. And so being modular in nature and being able to add or remove components or tweak features for particular user groups, but allowing them all to still be able to collaborate together on a common platform has been really transformational for public safety in particular.
Excellent. Nikki, thank you very much. Peter, Mike, are you seeing similar, examples in EMEA, South America, and APAC?
Mike, do you want to go first?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for us, I think it's all about choice. We want to allow people to choose different deployment targets, different infrastructure targets, and it's important that they can do that in a way that scales and they're not locked into different technologies. So we're very committed to microservices architectures using components like Docker and Kubernetes and those kinds of tools that allow our government customers to choose where they deploy and how they deploy it. And also give them control over the actual underlying services so that they can be scaled up to use the different use cases, to meet different use cases, and scale it up and scale it down as the use.
Mike.
Looks like Mike froze a little bit there. Peter, do you want to anything to add?
And related to that flexible architecture, we see a lot of implementation of government customers ending towards integrating it in their stack. So they're deploying certain services around communication in their case management solutions or in their government portals or towards their citizens. So yeah, we see that a lot here in this region as well. Yeah.
Well, I know for me, and thank you very much, Peter. I know for me, having a real, a real life example often helps, paint that proverbial picture. Nikki, do you have any real life examples where the flexibility modular platform came in for your clients?
Yeah, so just to give a little bit of context, Bridge for Public Safety is a branded version of RocketChat. So it is core RocketChat platform that has been customized for public safety. And we manage and control the user base to only allow in authorized users. So you have to be from a department that's eligible. And that gives a lot of flexibility for the user base to be able to come together and use chat messaging, secure file sharing across agencies in ways that really, to my knowledge, there's not anything else out there in the market that provides the level of capability. One example in particular, our real niche is and where some of the biggest value is in large multi-agency operations. There are some border operations where there are literally hundreds of troopers and border patrol agents being rotated, every 2 weeks or so, coming down to an area. They don't have common platforms to be able to share information with the county or local governments that are in those areas. And because of the dynamic nature and turnover of the staffing for such a large scale, situation, and we've got everything from like human trafficking to, other things. And so being able to have one platform that they know is secure, they can find the channels openly in the directory and join them as needed, regardless of their agency, without having to manage that, has provided some really profound impact and change in coordinating so many people across such a large geography with such dynamic operational environments. And those same people go home to a regular job every day. And so the fact that they can use Bridge in their everyday job, whether they're an investigator or a firefighter, or they're going down and supporting a hurricane response or a border operation, the platform itself allows the flexibility for them to be able to use it when and how they need to with the people that they need to use it with. And it's really powerful, and it's really exciting to see the kind of impact it's having.
Oh, that's fantastic. And that kind of leads me to kind of a follow-on question that we had as a real life example. You've touched upon some of those already, but how your government customers are have implemented RocketChat. For instance, you talk a little bit about external and customer comms and the internal. How else are you seeing your customers implement RocketChat?
So the the relationship or partnership between Mobility for Public Safety and RocketChat is really kind of what makes the magic that is delivering the impact, because we host the service on behalf of the whole public safety industry. So when users come in from any agency, they have inherent interoperability with everyone else in the platform, because we're hosting it in a secured government cloud environment. And so we are seeing some hybrid implementations where departments, especially since COVID, are adopting internal collaboration platforms supporting more of a remote workforce. And that's great for accessing internal department resources, but they're very limited in terms of being able to share information outside of a single department. And so by us hosting it on behalf of the industry and then allowing those departments to join as they're eligible, it provides that interoperability that they can't get from an internal collaboration platform. And what we're seeing is that the hybrid model works very well, because there are some things that you do want to do and keep internal to your department, and then other things that you need to be able to share operationally. And that the harder thing is getting people out of the use of legacy communications like email and phone calls and texts, and thinking in terms of and communicating in terms of persistent chat around topics and groups of people. And once you can kind of pivot to that mindset and communicating in a different way, to where it's not just blasting out emails to everybody, and most people miss them because they got buried under their inbox, especially in a bad day or a crisis situation. It allows people to disseminate and consume information in a much more streamlined fashion, which makes everything a little more effective. And so we've definitely seen an increase in the hybrid model, and at least in our user base.
I can appreciate, thank you, Nick, and I can appreciate, the flood of emails, especially for those poor Slack administrators today, right? The only way to communicate with them today is through email. So, Peter, what are you seeing in your, in your over in, in EMEA and some of the areas that you focus on?
Yeah, we're seeing some trends around that as well. So as we are speaking to multiple government agencies, in Europe, it's a little bit different, because we have people in Israel using a lot WhatsApp, which is, I think there's some mic moving around. Maybe Chris, it's you?
Possibly. I don't see anything on my side right now.
Okay, no, there was some background noise. Sorry for that. So to get back to that, Europe is a little bit different, because we have a lot of differences in different countries with legislation and the way they're using it. But especially, I think your question was more around microservice architecture and how they would drop that, Chris, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good segue in, because, I know that you, for instance, you have the Dutch government, and, and how folks are using microservices architecture to support their scalability needs. Can you speak to a little bit about that, about those requirements?
Yeah. I would say, so we have some larger scale customers there as well. And Mike, do you want to touch upon the microservice architecture and how they are setting that up?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of points from that use case. One was it was important for them to be able to embed the experience in other applications. So that involved going through an integration and white labeling exercise, so that the communication capabilities were kind of seen as a native part of enabling those other applications. And then alongside that, making use of things like the SDK, so that they could build custom clients that would deliver a very focused user experience. And all of that was backed by the microservices architecture, so that it could scale out to meet the large-scale use case that they had there. So it was really touching on multiple points, both from the client side and also from the back end, making use of the microservices. Those kinds of things are very difficult to do if you don't have things like client-side SDKs, if you don't have the controls over security, if you don't have the ability to easily embed and white label applications. So those were critical to them be able to address that particular use case.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Mike. And, and kind of, going on that similar role, I know that, we've had conversations regarding, the delivery of 24/7 government. And I know that's very, very important in your region of the world, Peter.
Yeah, we see that actually more and more often as a question. And then it comes to integrating what we call Omnichannel into our platform and team collaboration platform. And we see actually, and we're actively speaking to local governments that want to implement a live chat with chatbot functionality to support their customers their customers/citizens in a different way. And I would say we have something called customer excellence, but I spoke to one of our partners actually this afternoon who spoke about citizens excellence and how we can bring new services towards their citizens. And I would say RocketChat delivers a unique capability of integrating that outside world with the inside world, and even routing that based on the questions that we are getting, or giving answers pre-confined already to the citizen. So I think, I think we see that a lot as a question on how to address those citizens in a different way. Yeah.
No, on that kind of, and this is, in continuing that theme, what role in your opinion does open source play in providing that flexibility, right? Especially for governments that are working with legacy systems, or they've got multiple platforms of engagement. How do you see that roll out?
Yeah, I would say it's almost a mandatory question from most governments that we see in Sweden, in the Netherlands, in Israel, in Germany, and specifically, it's about the flexibility that open source brings to them, and the flexibility that it brings on the integration side as well. Especially if you look at all those legacy systems and integrating with those systems, like, for example, government case management, and integrating workstream collaboration functionality around the cases that they're handling on a day-to-day basis. That brings a lot of value and a lot of speed and agility to, I would say, the older legacy systems that they already deployed. So it's mostly about integration, flexibility, speed, that they will choose open source over on-prem or legacy systems, I would say.
And Nikki, I see that time and time again with, my federal customers here, whether it's the U.S. Navy or the U.S. Air Force, the World Bank, for instance. We're seeing a lot of legacy systems. What have you encountered with some of your deployments around, the need for the open source?
I mean, one, it's generally considered best practice, and some of NIST recommendations because of the security and the fact that there is a global community that is looking at vulnerabilities and identifying those and remediating them quickly. And besides from, really a security standpoint, I know that for us, one of our key differentiators is being able to, we're trying to replace the WhatsApp and the use of these consumer grade free tools in public safety operations, because there's a lack of any sort of compliant, viable alternative. But all those requirements for compliance and security and all the other things add a lot of cost. And so being able to leverage an open source platform that is very feature rich and robust, we would never be able to deliver the kind of platform with the services and be able to iterate and customize the changes that our end users need for their specific missions and their jobs if we were dependent on an internal IT, development team to build that out. And so by leveraging open source and the power of a global development community, we're able to continue to iterate and meet the changing, evolving requirements in a secure manner on a secure and feature-rich platform.
Well, you hit on something in your description there, and it's something that we talk about as omnichannel, right? In your opinion, what is the future of omnichannel in government?
I think that there is a lot of opportunity for it. And certainly as standards and technologies evolve to allow more integrations and people to have more choice in, the particular product or flavor that they use for something, there is a lot of potential offered there. I can also say that in a government context, particularly with U.S. federal government requirements for some compliance for cloud services. There are a lot of controls around integrations and making sure that you're protecting the integrity of each platform. And every time you connect to something else, it does potentially open up exposure and risk because you're now no longer, firewalled off and keeping your systems separate. So there are some risks, and I think it does need to be addressed in a methodical way that is architected. And I know that some of the things that the federal government is doing in terms of standards and recommendations for cloud services in general, but also for integrations across platforms and things like Omnichannel. It's certainly not a trivial subject, let's put it that way, but it offers a tremendous amount of value and opportunity and potential to solve real world problems that are facing our user base in particular, that I'm glad are being addressed. And I think we'll see a lot more potential, heading in that direction.
Well, you raise, that, and that kind of segues into our, into the second major finding, the major theme that we saw in speaking with, IT folks and non-IT folks last year. And that's, the governments also need, so in addition to the flexibility and the modularity, that governments also need software that never compromises data and is always secure, that you just discussed. And, I know I've seen one of the questions in the chat here, asking to spend a little bit more time maybe explaining what pushes a public safety agency to not use, your on-prem deployment option, and rather than letting you host on their behalf.
For me,
yeah, so yeah, and I know you've got real world experience here with that, so maybe we can spend a little bit of time, delving into that.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So the thing that really drives me and gets me up and moving every day is I've been working in public safety for over 20 years and in the public safety mobile broadband movement for most of that time, since the first public safety broadband wireless network was deployed in DC government in 2004. And most public safety technologies have fragmented implementations due to a federated system of government that we have, particularly here in the US, but it's not unique to the United States. And so I don't want to see a day where all this time and energy and money and everything went into providing mobile broadband technologies and capabilities to first responders who show up at incidents still not able to effectively share information. And one of the problems with on-prem enterprise deployments is that everything is secured behind your own network. So it is secured for your internal department purposes, but it really limits the flexibility for being able to share information outside of your organization. And so the reality is that a lot of these people, in lieu of a viable alternative, they are turning to shadow IT and putting information that really shouldn't be used on WhatsApp or Signal or GroupMe or some of these other platforms. They don't have anything else, and text and chat-based messaging has become an operational communications tool, but on-prem deployments limit the ability for interoperability and information sharing across departments and across agencies. And also the industry, at least in the public safety space, has not really evolved to the point yet of every responder having a cell phone. And so there are a lot of on-prem deployments that are also limited to agency issued devices. So if you don't have a phone or a computer that has the VPN and all the MDM and all the other controls on it, you can't use those services. So there are departments that have robust on-prem deployments of different types of systems that still aren't effective at preventing information from being used on personal devices or on consumer grade apps with known security vulnerabilities, because even though they have the system, it's not accessible to all their personnel. And so what Bridge offers is secure cloud-based technology that really are niches in focusing on the interoperability, but also on the fact that because it's stored in the cloud, there is nothing stored on a device. And so if there is a person that is using their own phone for something operationally, they can keep their work information separate in Bridge. If they lose the device, they can just log out of it. There's a lot of protection around that, and that information is not commingled with any of their personal information with their buddies from their squad talking about going to the bar. They can do that in text and WhatsApp and whatever else. The other advantage is by offering enterprise features that consumer grade chat and messaging platforms don't offer, they can also use it across platforms, so they can plan their operations on the computer and then build their channels and put all their ops plans and do everything there, and then have that information handy on their mobile device. And then when it's time for after action or case management, case reporting, those types of things, they can do exports and attach everything to their files. It's streamlined a lot of things across the board. And so the biggest difference that I see, and that, it's not to say that they don't have legitimate needs for on-prem deployments of some things, but they are also limited in terms of the information sharing for the people out in the field to be able to really do their job effectively. So that's where the cloud, the SaaS service that's for the entire industry to come together has some unique value. And thank you for the comment.
No, thank you, Nikki. That's fantastic and very, very well stated. And you talked about commingling of data and data integrity. Mike, I want to open up the question to you. Europe has led the way, for years now in data integrity and data protection. And being able to share, both, the on-prem and in the cloud. And I know with the COVID and work from home, sharing certain data in Europe across the cloud poses some challenges. Can you speak to some of those that you're running into on a regular basis?
Yeah, absolutely. Just before I get into that, I think my video may be having some problems, which so some of the challenges working from home these days. So hopefully you can still hear me okay.
We can hear you fine, and if you want to turn the camera off and just have your picture up, that might help your audio a little.
Yeah, I think I've on the back channel I was told I was frozen, so maybe it's best if I do that. Yeah, so I think there's a number of areas around security, data protection that in Europe in particular we're very hot on. One of those is data residency. So we have a number of legal requirements to ensure that data doesn't leave jurisdictions. So we need to ensure that we have control over where that data resides. And that's a big driver for people wanting to be able to deploy solutions into their own data centers, or at least data centers that are within their particular physical location. Other areas which are things like data loss prevention, GDPR. Peter can speak a little more about particular standards that apply there, but ensuring that we have the ability to track and prevent PII data, for example, being shared inappropriately, capture it when it is being entered into the system, so that we can keep track of that. And those are key areas that Rocket are able to help our customers, being able to address some of those challenges. Other things like end-to-end encryption to ensure that people are not eavesdropping into conversations, ensuring that messages are being sent in a way that means they can't be read when they're in transit. So all of those kinds of things are very important, obviously, when we're dealing with that kind of sensitive data. And again, it's an area that we're very focused on as an organization. It's one of our strongest points, actually, is the ability to meet some of those stringent requirements for security and data loss prevention and things like that. Peter, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
It's a lot of our opportunities and a lot of our conversations that we have together with government agencies in the region are coming out of the conversation around GDPR and the data legislation and the privacy legislation that we have in Europe. And we have similarities in other parts of my region as well, in Russia or outside of the European Union, where they talk to us about not being able to use cloud services provided by some other vendors out there for very specific data, and it's even in the government legislation and laws that they cannot use cloud service to share any data privacy information over any cloud service. So that means if you look back at the past 2 years in this COVID pandemic that we have been in, that it's sorry, my light is turning out automatically. That's very interesting during the webinar as well. Maybe the government is doing that, right?
It's an interrogation now. It's an interrogation now, Peter.
Interrogation, that's it. Especially during the last 2 years, where a lot of cloud services have been used against the laws that have been in a lot of regulated countries. So we see now that there is a catch-up from a lot of government agencies in looking at data privacy and the way they're treating that over these channels. Like, for example, WhatsApp, right? A lot of agencies are using this sort of shadow IT, and Nikki, you mentioned it just before as well, which is definitely a problem because there's a lot of sensitive information being shared over some cloud services, which is definitely not allowed in all parts of the world, I would say.
Right. No, that's certainly. I know you and I have been speaking about that over the last couple of weeks, Peter, and it's certainly and that does raise a good point. I got a question for Nikki. We're talking about protecting the data, but there's a fine line here, in the U.S. between privacy and transparency. Can you talk to how you walk that line?
I would say it is not a line. It is a very big, messy pot of spaghetti that, local, county, state, federal regulations around privacy and transparency vary significantly.
Right.
And, it's not always that clear. Well, neither of those is completely clear on their own anyway. But when you now get into questions of a public sector, my case, public safety user, and their information as a matter of public record in most cases, and for law enforcement in particular, that can be subject to discovery, and there are legal protections around it, and who has access or doesn't, and so it's a very complex environment that is not getting any more streamlined, at least from what I can see. And so, you have things where like Facebook changes their privacy policy for WhatsApp, and then you get a flood of people that rush over to Signal. And then you have states like Michigan that say, wait a minute, you can't put government information. That is government content. The citizens, the constituents have right to see that information. You can't store that on a device that nobody has access to, or you can't store that and I don't remember the exact legislation, but basically they've outlawed Signal. And there were a lot of people that got in trouble with the Michigan State Police because there was a perception that they were trying to use this platform that's really designed around privacy, and it's great for personal communications and keeping those things more private than some of the other alternatives out there. But that's in direct violation to the requirements of the communications those same people are doing operationally for their work. And so whether you're intending to do something wrong or you're naively using a platform that you think is better than the alternative because nobody's giving you anything else, people are getting in trouble for things that maybe they shouldn't be getting in trouble for because they don't have an alternative that is viable. And and I can tell you, I mean, we are Bridge was launched initially under a grant from Department of Homeland Security as a proof of concept. We've since evolved to a production, platform, and we've received another grant to achieve federal compliance because they know that they need to subsidize the security and compliance to meet the requirements of this industry, and that market forces and left to, we're not selling data. We wouldn't. And so we're not generating revenues the same way that those consumer grade platforms are, and creating challenges both on the privacy and the transparency side for what happens to that information. And so we've had to be really creative in structuring our EULA, our end user license agreement, and privacy policy, and the way that we store data and who has access to it, so that the onus is not on us. We'd never be able to keep up with who needs to store it for how long or when or what they need to get rid of or who has access to it. we make it available in a way that is compliant, and then each jurisdiction or user or agency is responsible for permanent retention according to whatever laws and regulations they are bound by. And so it seems to be working well for us, and being able to accommodate that line and having each jurisdiction. And we've had some that they've changed their policies for their in their city about retention to account for real-time collaboration communications having different policies than email and other things that they store. And so I think it's interesting, it's challenging, and it's just going to continue to get more and more complex. So
Well, I appreciate that, and it's always, there's always that balance. You get that person with something that's great for personal communication, and then you run into the operational communications. And I think, you just talk about what drives that shadow IT here and in Europe and in other locations. Again, I know Europe has been very kind of a forerunner on compliancy. What has been, and I guess, Nikki, with what your experience has been, you work with different jurisdictions, you work with different states, you work with Customs Border Protection from a national, from a federal government perspective. What are you seeing, in the works to say, a federally compliant, are they federally compliant for chat today? Or is it more of a patchwork of regulations?
So the federal standard for compliance for cloud services is called FedRAMP. And so we are actively in the process of we were architected always from the beginning to reach that standard, but it's still a process to become ready and then fully, it's called authority to operate. And so there are platforms that are approved, and so they could do on-prem deployments. Microsoft Teams is compliant, but again, you don't get the level of interoperability. But the consumer grade apps like WhatsApp and GroupMe, Signal, those types of tools are not. And there's a FedRAMP marketplace. You can go look it up. There are none in there, which is part of the driver behind why the Department of Homeland Security recognized that in order to officially adopt, you have to have this standard that costs millions of dollars and can take anywhere from 18 to 24 months to achieve. And the projections are that it doesn't even make sense to try to get it unless you expect millions and millions of dollars in federal revenues. And then there's nothing in between. So it's consumer, on-prem, enterprise, inside your one department, or nothing. And so we are striving to get there to fill that pretty niche gap in terms of interoperable chat and collaboration.
Well, well, thank you very much, Nikki. That was, it is a challenge. I just see a question in the chat that actually gives us a nice segue in to the third thing that we uncovered as a major theme during our conversations last year. And, the question in chat was asking about, what are the most in-demand integrations government agencies look for? Our third thing that we found, we'll get into the question here, was that, government needs software that provides a better user experience. Right. So along those lines, Peter, what have you seen as far as some of the most in-demand integrations helping, the software provide a better user experience?
Yeah, so I would say this is a tricky question because it's also very much dependent on which part of Europe you would ask that question, as it's hard. But what we see, I will give you an example. We see, for example, in the Swedish government, and I know there's somebody joining us from that region as well. We see a high demand now for a full productivity stack, where RocketChat plays part in obviously the team collaboration, but they're also looking in a different way of emailing, sharing files, and having a one integrated stack to compete with some other vendors out there that deliver that integrated stack. So the likes of OwnCloud, Nextcloud, those integrations we see, Zimbra for email, where we actually can provide a full open source alternative to some other vendors that are out there for an on-prem deployment. That's what we are seeing here. But also the integration, like we earlier said, in a government portal. We already have some conversations on something that is still hot, which is a Corona hotline where people are calling into and doing that in a chat portal. So they log into their government portal and they use that layer to communicate with the government on specific test appointment or a vaccination appointment. So we see those kinds of integrations, but it varies per region, I would say, in Europe. So maybe Nikki, you can speak to that a little bit more on what it means for the US.
So I'll frame in the context that as a citizen, what I am seeing my government agencies deliver and what I want them to deliver is very different than the integrations that I'm seeing my users ask for to conduct their own public safety operations. So Bridge really is not constituent focused. Obviously, they are supporting constituents and protecting life and property, but our use cases is niche in that. But so ours, we've seen a huge increase in the request for integrations for various types of video, and we're seeing drone video and those requests increase quite a bit. A lot of those proprietary video systems, you have to have a dedicated login to be able to view the video, but with integrations in the Bridge, we can actually post the video, broadcast it directly into a channel. So you don't have to set up a login specifically for someone, or if a lot of them actually use private YouTube channels, but they don't want to get that password out to everybody, because that same drone that might be monitoring civil unrest could also be used for a homicide investigation later, and there's one password on that account. So being able to stream the video directly into a channel for that particular operation, so that the people that are in the operation get to see the video but nobody else, that's been a pretty big use case. Streamlining consumption of information of things like incident alerts, COVID-19 updates, daily briefings, those types of things often get either posted on message boards in certain, like incident management platforms and things that a lot of people aren't monitoring all the time, and they aren't getting that information real time. So while it's there, it's not very usable or consumable for a lot of people. And then there are also ones that just get blasted out in email, and again, they just get buried and people don't see them. So we actually have a number of integrations set up where we can post incident alerts of different types in a dedicated channel. So you can mute the notifications if you don't actually want it real time, but you can have your COVID alerts for your department in one channel, and then your fire alarms in another. And so being able to consume information from other platforms that they use and streamline the way it's delivered in a persistent chat format has proven highly valuable. So we're seeing a lot of that in terms of tying in integrations with some of their existing systems to be able to disseminate information to people that don't necessarily have access, like automated license plate readers. They'll drive around in their cars and it'll ding, but only a few people get the email about it. We can push those straight into a channel that anybody on duty can actually see when the hit happened. So there's a lot of cool stuff and a lot of demand. And I think fundamentally where RocketChat and where collaboration plays in this is that it is so different than most enterprise platforms that are based on data models and structured data and structured processes, that it offers a tremendous amount of flexibility to take the things that are done well in other platforms and disseminate and consume in ways that aren't possible through those native platforms alone.
I don't know,
Sorry,
it
a
just
little long there.
No, that just sounds, it's when you start to think of the versatility and the flexibility and the types of integrations, the in-app chats, the Omnichannel, all being driven by the open source. It's just, it's quite it's powerful. And, I get excited on hearing that. I see that it's 11:43. We've got a couple minutes left. I'm looking at in chat here. I don't see any additional questions. But I'll throw this out to the panel. We've covered, to summarize, we've covered a few things today where we found that governments need flexible and modular platforms. Governments also need a software that never compromises data and is always secure. And we're doing that with providing a better user experience while also helping cut the cost of delivery. Is there anything that, Peter, that you would like to add, or Mike, that you would like to add to the conversation that we may not have addressed during the past 44 minutes?
Mike?
Yeah, I think the if I was to summarize our approach here, I think I touched on a little bit at the beginning. Is I think ultimately this comes down to choice and flexibility, and that's really what we bring to the table here. So, choice over where you're deploying, be that to the cloud or be that to an on-premise deployment. Choice over what integrations you have. Choice over where the data resides. So we offer a lot more flexibility around those choices than maybe some of the other vendors in the space too. And I think that's one of the key reasons why people are coming to us to for our solutions is because of the choice that it provides and the lack of the lack of lock-in that you may get with other approaches.
Well, I appreciate that, Mike, and I concur. Even the choice of deployment, whether you want to have it as a hosted solution or on-prem, right? A lot of my U.S. government customers choose to do an on-prem deployment for both security and operational, awareness. So that folks brings us right to 11:45. I want to thank the panel. Thank you very much, Nikki, for joining us today. Peter and Mike, appreciate you folks being part of the panel. Everyone on the that's attended today, thank you very much for all of your questions, your engagement. We do have this recorded, and we'll be able to make this available afterwards. And then don't forget, and you can actually click on the link now. We have coming up on March 23rd, we have an online session where we're talking through building an in-app chat with Rocket.Chat. So some of the conversations that Nikki was having right towards the end of some of the versatility and flexibility within the communications channel, we'll be walking through a real live session of this. So if you click up, there's a save your seat now, and you can go ahead and register for the next one before you leave us today. With that, I want to thank everyone, and certainly appreciate everyone's time, and hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.